The Vorathi Dominion had conquered 11 species across 3 galactic arms. Their method was simple and cruel. They would arrive with their massive fleet, send a message demanding surrender, and wait for the begging to begin. Every species did the same thing. They cried, they pleaded, they offered everything they had just to survive. The Vorathi had done this so many times that conquest had become boring. It was routine now, like paperwork. Commander Thyrol stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Mandate. He was old for a Vorathi, his scaled skin turning gray at the edges, but his eyes were still sharp. Behind him, 300 warships hung in the darkness of space. Each one carried enough firepower to turn a continent to glass. Together, they had never lost a single battle. Below them, 2 million kilometers away, floated a blue and green world. Earth, the humans called it. Such a simple name for a home. Thyrol studied the planet on his view screen. The humans were a young species. They had only reached their own moon about a century ago. Their ships were made of primitive metals, powered by chemical explosions. They still fought wars among themselves over lines drawn on maps. By galactic standards, they were children playing with sharp sticks. This would be easy. Send the message, Thyrol ordered. His communications officer, a nervous young Vorathi named Keth, pressed the controls. The ultimatum broadcast on every frequency, in every human language their probes had learned. The message was simple. Surrender immediately, give up all weapons, and submit to genetic cataloging for integration into the Dominion. Resistance would result in extinction. They had 12 hours to respond. Thyrol settled into his command chair. Now we wait. He expected the response within the hour. That was usually how long it took for a species to process their terror and start begging. Some species responded in minutes. The fastest had been the Yalori, who had surrendered before the message even finished playing. 1 hour passed. The communications console stayed silent. Thyrol was not worried. Perhaps the humans needed time to organize. Their world was divided into many nations. After all, they probably needed to argue among themselves before they could agree to surrender. 2 hours passed. Still nothing. Check the equipment, Thyrol said. Make sure they received the transmission. Keth ran diagnostics. The equipment is working perfectly, Commander. They definitely received it. Every device on the planet picked up our signal. 3 hours, 4, 5. Thyrol began to feel something unfamiliar. It took him a moment to recognize it as confusion. This had never happened before. Every species responded, even the proud ones, the warrior cultures who boasted about fighting to the death. They always responded, even if only to curse and threaten. They acknowledged the message. The humans did nothing. What are they doing down there? Thyrol asked. A sensor officer pulled up data from their surveillance probes. They are continuing their normal activities, Commander. Show me. The view screen changed to show feeds from across the planet. In one city, humans sat in a room watching a cooking show. A woman was explaining how to make something called pasta. In another location, thousands of humans gathered in a large stadium to watch other humans kick a ball across a field. Elsewhere, a child was having a birthday party. Her parents sang songs while she blew out small fires on top of a cake. Thyrol stared at the screen. They are watching cooking shows. Yes, Commander. We just told them we would destroy their civilization, and they are watching someone make pasta. It appears to be a very popular show, Commander. Thyrol did not know how to process this. Were the humans stupid? Had they not understood the message? Or were they so primitive that they could not recognize a genuine threat? Hour 6, hour 7. The bridge crew grew restless. They whispered among themselves, sneaking glances at their commander. This was wrong. This was not how conquest worked. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Perhaps they are paralyzed by fear, one of Thyrol's advisors suggested. Some species freeze when threatened. Their minds cannot accept reality, so they pretend nothing is happening. Thyrol considered this. It made sense. Denial was a common response to overwhelming terror. The humans were simply pretending the fleet did not exist because facing the truth would break them. We will give them one full planetary rotation, Thyrol decided. Then we descend and take what is ours. The crew seemed relieved to have a plan. They returned to their stations, monitoring the silent planet below. Hour 10, hour 11. Thyrol noticed something odd. Earth's orbital stations, crude metal structures that humans used for research and communication, had gone dark. They had been active earlier, transmitting signals back and forth. Now they were silent. "What happened to their orbital facilities?" he asked. The sensor officer checked her instruments. "They are still there, Commander. Systems appear functional. They simply stopped transmitting." "Stopped? Why?" "Unknown, Commander." This bothered Tyrell more than he wanted to admit. The stations had not been destroyed. They had not malfunctioned. Someone had simply turned them off, as if preparing for something. Hour 12 came and went. No response from Earth. Tyrell had conquered 11 species. He had seen every reaction to dominion. He had seen terror and rage and despair and desperate hope. He had seen species try to fight and species try to hide and species try to bargain. He had never seen a species simply ignore him. It was, he realized, deeply insulting. "Prepare the fleet for descent," he ordered. "If they will not surrender, we will make an example of them." The crew jumped to action, grateful for something to do. Weapons charged. Engines hummed. 300 warships began to move toward the blue planet. Then a sensor technician spoke up. "Commander, I am detecting an anomaly." Tyrell turned. "What kind of anomaly?" "A gravitational fluctuation. Near the 8th planet." The technician checked his readings twice. It lasted only a moment. "Probably instrument error." "Probably," Tyrell agreed. "Ignore it. Focus on the mission." The technician nodded and returned to his work. But his hands were shaking slightly as he deleted the reading from his log. On the planet below, the cooking show ended. A new program began. Something about home renovation. A woman was explaining how to install kitchen cabinets. Millions of humans watched, apparently fascinated by the process. The birthday party continued. The little girl opened her presents while her parents recorded everything on their primitive devices. She seemed happy with a stuffed animal shaped like some kind of earth creature. The football match went into extra time. The crowd cheered when someone scored a goal. Life on Earth continued as if nothing was happening. As if 300 warships were not hanging in their sky. As if their entire civilization had not been threatened with extinction. Tyrell watched the feeds and felt the first small seed of doubt plant itself in his mind. There was something wrong here. Something he was not seeing. The humans were not acting like prey. They were not even acting like equals who might choose to fight. They were acting like the fleet did not matter. Like it was beneath their notice. Tyrell pushed the doubt away. They were primitives. They had chemical rockets and radio waves. They were nothing. But as his fleet moved toward Earth, the silence from the planet below seemed to grow heavier. More watchful. More patient. Like something was waiting for them to come closer. The second day brought the first disappearance. Scout vessel Whisper of Conquest was a small ship, carrying only 47 crew members. Its job was simple. Patrol the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets, and report anything unusual. It was boring work, far from the glory of conquest, and the crew complained constantly about their assignment. At hour 16 after the ultimatum, the Whisper sent its regular report. The communications officer, a young Varathi fresh from training, read out ore composition data from a nearby asteroid. He mentioned that the food supplies were getting repetitive. He hoped the conquest would finish soon so they could return to proper rations. The message ended normally. The next scheduled report was due in 2 hours. It never came. Commander Tyrell noticed the gap in communications 3 hours later. By then, the silence had stretched too long to ignore. "Contact the Whisper of Conquest," he ordered. "Find out why they missed their report." The communications officer tried. No response. He tried again. Nothing. He boosted the signal strength and sent the message on every frequency the Varathi used. The void answered with silence. "Send a recovery team," Tyrell said. His voice was calm, but something cold had begun to form in his chest. 3 vessels changed course and headed for the Whisper's last known position. They found it 2 hours later, drifting slowly near a large asteroid. The ship was intact, no damage, no battle scars, no indication that anything had happened at all. The recovery team docked with the Whisper and went aboard. The ship was empty. Not destroyed, empty. Not battle, empty. The lights still worked. Life support hummed along perfectly. Consoles displayed readouts. Someone's meal sat half-eaten on a table in the crew quarters, still warm, but the crew was gone. All 47 of them. No bodies. No blood. No sign of struggle. The security footage showed them at their stations, doing their jobs. And then static covered the screen for exactly 3 seconds. When the image cleared, the chairs were empty. Some were still spinning from the sudden absence of weight. 47 Vorathi had simply stopped existing. The recovery team leader sent his report with shaking hands. Commander Thyrol read it 3 times, certain he was missing something. Ships did not lose their crews this way. People did not simply vanish. Search the entire vessel, he ordered. Check every compartment, every storage space. They must be somewhere. They searched for 4 hours. They found nothing. The crew of the Whisper of Conquest was gone as completely as if they had never existed. Thyrol wanted to believe it was some kind of accident, a malfunction, a gas leak that had somehow disposed of the bodies. He wanted any explanation that made sense. Then it happened again. The destroyer Blade of Dominion vanished near the 4th planet. Not just the crew this time. The entire ship. One moment it appeared on sensors. A powerful warship with 300 crew members, and enough weapons to level a city. The next moment, the sensors showed empty space. No explosion, no debris, no distress call. Just nothing. Thyrol felt the cold in his chest spread outward. Over the next 30 hours, it continued. A communication relay near the 5th planet stopped responding. When ships arrived to investigate, they found the station intact but empty. A medical frigate that posed no military threat whatsoever lost all its crew between one heartbeat and the next. 2 patrol vessels near the 7th planet reported seeing something strange in the darkness before their transmissions cut off permanently. The pattern made no sense. Large ships and small ships. Armed vessels and unarmed vessels. Ships close to Earth and ships at the edge of the solar system. The only thing they had in common was that each one had been actively scanning the 3rd planet at the moment they disappeared. Thyrol understood. He did not want to understand. But he did. All ships cease active scanning of Earth immediately. He broadcast to the fleet. Switched to passive sensors only. No direct observation. The disappearances stopped, but now the fleet was blind. They could see the planet as a blue dot in the distance, but they could not watch it closely. They could not observe the humans. Every time they had tried, something had reached out from the void and taken them, and Earth still had not responded to the ultimatum. On the planet below, life continued normally. The fleet's passive sensors could pick up radio and television signals, the primitive broadcasts humans sent through their atmosphere. Thyrol watched these transmissions and felt his confusion grow into something darker. A morning news program discussed weather patterns and traffic delays. A talk show interviewed a celebrity about their upcoming movie. A children's cartoon featured colorful animals teaching lessons about friendship. A cooking competition reached its dramatic finale as contestants raced to finish their desserts. The humans went about their lives. They worked and played and argued and loved. They had parties and funerals and weddings and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. They acted as if the armada in their sky did not exist. Thyrol had stopped believing this was denial. Denial did not look like this. Denial was pretending not to see the monster in the room. This was something else entirely. This was the calm certainty of someone who knew the monster was there and simply did not care, because maybe they knew something the monster did not. A young analyst named Selah approached Thyrol's command chair with hesitation in every step. She was small for a Vorathi, with quick eyes and quicker thoughts. Her job was to study data, to find patterns, to make sense of senseless things. "Commander," she said quietly, "I have been reviewing the footage from the vanished ships. What did you find?" She swallowed. "The static. The interference that appears right before each disappearance. It is not random." Thyrol turned to look at her. "Explain." "There are patterns in the static. Mathematical patterns. I believe it is a message." She hesitated. "I have begun translating it." "And?" Selah looked like she wished she had never started. "It is a warning. And coordinates. Hundreds of coordinates. Coordinates to what? To us. To every ship in the fleet." She pulled up her datapad with trembling claws. "The message says, when you look, we see. When we see, we arrive." Thyrol stared at the words on the screen. His scales had gone pale. "There is also a countdown," Selah added. "I do not know what it is counting down to, but we have approximately 6 hours remaining." Around them, the bridge crew had gone silent. Every Vorathi present had heard the analyst's words. Every one of them was thinking the same thing. What happens when the countdown ends? Thyrol looked out the viewport at the distant blue planet. Earth hung in the void like a jewel. beautiful and silent and utterly indifferent to the fear spreading through his fleet. The humans had not responded to the ultimatum because they did not need to. They were not afraid of the Vorathi. They were not impressed by the weapons or the ships or the threats. They were simply waiting. Patient. Calm. Like predators who knew their prey would eventually make a mistake. And the Vorathi had made so many mistakes already. Sayla worked through the night in her small analysis chamber. Her claws moved across the console without rest. Her eyes burned from staring at data streams, but she could not stop. The truth was hiding in the static, and she was so close to finding it. The patterns were complex. Whoever had created them was working with mathematics far beyond Vorathi understanding. It was like a child trying to read a document written for scholars. Sayla could see that meaning existed, but grasping it required her to stretch her mind in directions it had never gone before. Hour by hour, she pulled fragments of understanding from the chaos. Each piece made the picture clearer. Each piece made her wish she had chosen a different career. Commander Thyrell arrived at her chamber with 4 hours remaining on the countdown. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. The disappearances had aged him. "What have you found?" he demanded. Sayla turned to face him. Her scales had gone pale, almost white. "The humans are not what we thought they were." "Explain." She pulled up her findings on the main display. "I searched our intelligence archives. Our advanced scouts studied Earth for decades before we arrived. They compiled reports on human culture, history, technology. Most of it was dismissed as irrelevant. Primitive superstitions. Mythology. Get to the point. The mythology is not myth." Sayla highlighted several documents. Humans have stories going back thousands of years. Stories about watchers in the darkness, beings that observe from beyond normal space, old warnings carved in dead languages about something sleeping beneath the surface of their world. Thyrell frowned. "Every species has creation myths, superstitions, fairy tales to explain what they do not understand." "Yes, but humans do something no other species does." Sayla showed him images of ancient structures. They build monuments aligned with stars that should mean nothing to them. Stars that, according to our records, do not exist anymore. Stars that burned out millions of years before humanity evolved. The commander stared at the images. Pyramids and temples and standing stones, all pointing at empty patches of sky. How could they know where dead stars used to be? Sayla asked. They did not have telescopes. They did not have written language. They were barely using tools. But somehow, they knew. "What are you suggesting?" Sayla took a deep breath. "I am suggesting that humanity has never been alone. I am suggesting that something has been with them from the beginning, watching, waiting, guiding them in ways we cannot understand. That is absurd. They have chemical rockets, radio waves. They still fight wars over territory. Yes, that is what they show us." Sayla changed the display to show the decoded static patterns. The message in the interference revealed more than coordinates and warnings. It contained fragments of information, technical data, mathematical concepts. She pointed to a section of the display. "This describes a propulsion system that operates outside normal space-time. This explains how to fold dimensions like paper. This contains equations for manipulating gravity at the quantum level." Thyrell felt cold. "That is impossible. No species has that technology. Not even the most ancient civilizations we have encountered. The data does not care about possible or impossible. It simply is." Sayla met his eyes. "Commander, I believe humanity has been preparing for this moment for a very long time, perhaps thousands of years, perhaps longer. They knew someone would come eventually, and they wanted to be ready. Then why the primitive appearance? Why the cooking shows and football matches? Why pretend to be helpless? I do not know. Perhaps it is a test. Perhaps they wanted to see what we would do when we thought we had power over them." Sayla paused. "Or perhaps they simply do not consider us a real threat, the way we might not consider an insect a real threat, even if it flew into our home uninvited." Thyrell wanted to argue. He wanted to dismiss this as the ravings of an analyst who had worked too long without sleep. But the empty ships floated in his mind. The vanished crews, the countdown that continued to tick toward zero. "How much time remains?" he asked. 3 hours and 17 minutes. "And you still do not know what happens when it ends?" Sayla shook her head. "The message does not say. But I found something else in the data. A signature. A label." She displayed a symbol on the screen. It was simple, elegant, somehow both ancient and impossibly advanced. This symbol appears throughout human history, Selah said, carved in caves, painted on temple walls, hidden in artwork, always the same design, always in places connected to those old stories about watchers in the darkness. Thyral studied the symbol. It meant nothing to him, but looking at it made something deep in his brain want to look away. What does it mean? I translated it as best I could. Selah's voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. The closest meaning in our language would be, the quiet ones or, those who wait in silence. But there is a secondary meaning, a implication beneath the surface, which is, Selah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her words were heavy with dread. The ones who have already won. The countdown continued. 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Commander Thyral stood on his bridge and watched the timer fall toward 0. His crew worked in silence. No one spoke. No one made unnecessary sounds. The air itself felt thick with waiting. On the distant planet, the humans continued their lives. A mother read a bedtime story to her children. A university student studied for an exam. An old man sat on his porch and watched the sunset paint the clouds orange and pink. They did not look up. They did not seem to know or care that an alien fleet hung above them. They were peaceful, content, utterly unafraid. The countdown reached 10 seconds. Thyral gripped the arms of his chair. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Every light on the eternal mandate flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for darkness to kiss the edge of vision. When the light steadied, Thyral heard a sound from behind him. A soft gasp. He turned. His second-in-command, a veteran of 30 conquest campaigns, was gone. His chair sat empty, still turning slowly from the sudden absence of weight. His console displayed unfinished commands. His coffee cup sat on the armrest, still steaming. Thyral stared at the empty chair. Around the bridge, his crew stared as well. No one had seen anything. No one had heard anything. One moment the officer was there. The next moment, he was not. The silence that followed was absolute. It pressed against the walls. It filled the spaces between heartbeats. It waited, and somewhere far below, on the blue and green world that humanity called home, a cooking show began its next episode. Panic spread through the Vorathi fleet like fire through dry grass. It started on the Eternal Mandate, where crew members had watched their second-in-command vanish from existence. They screamed. They ran. They clawed at doors and begged to be let off the ship. Some fell to their knees and prayed to gods they had abandoned centuries ago. The panic spread through communications. Ship after ship reported the same thing. Someone had vanished. An officer here, a technician there. One vessel lost its entire command staff in a single moment. Another found its weapons officers gone, leaving unmanned consoles and empty chairs that still held the warmth of bodies that no longer existed. Commander Thyral tried to maintain order. He broadcast commands. He demanded calm. He threatened punishment for desertion. But his voice shook, and everyone could hear it. The conqueror of 11 worlds was afraid. One captain decided to run. His ship, the Fist of Victory, broke formation and accelerated toward the edge of the solar system. He pushed the engines beyond their limits, desperate to escape whatever was hunting them. The Fist of Victory traveled exactly 3 kilometers before it came apart. It did not explode. There was no fire, no blast, no debris flying outward. Instead, the ship simply separated. Every molecule of its hull drifted away from every other molecule, spreading outward in a perfect sphere. The metal and the crew and the air they breathed all became dust, floating gently through the void like seeds from a flower. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was a message. No one else tried to run. The Vorathi fleet hung in space, paralyzed by fear too large to comprehend. Weapons officers fired blindly into the darkness, their shots disappearing into nothing. Some crew members locked themselves in storage compartments, believing that hiding might save them. Others simply sat and stared at nothing, their minds broken by the impossibility of what they had witnessed. And then, finally, Earth responded. It did not respond with words or transmissions or signals. It responded with presence. A woman appeared on the bridge of the Eternal Mandate. She did not arrive through the doors. She did not materialize through any technology the Vorathi recognized. She simply was. One moment, the space beside Commander Thyral was empty. The next moment, she stood there as if she had always been standing there. as if reality had simply adjusted itself to include her. She was human, middle-aged by their standards. Her hair was graying at the temples. Her clothes were casual, the kind a human might wear while relaxing at home. She held a cup in her hands. Steam rose from whatever liquid filled it. She looked at Tyrell. Her expression was difficult to read. Curious, perhaps. Possibly amused. Definitely not afraid. "You wanted our reply," she said in perfect Vorathi. Her accent was flawless. "Here it is." Tyrell could not speak. His voice had abandoned him. He stared at the human woman and felt very small. "Go home," she continued. "Leave this system. Tell your dominion that Earth is closed. Tell them we have been watching their conquests for 600 of your years. Tell them we allowed this incursion because we were curious. We wanted to see if you had learned anything since we last checked." She took a sip from her cup. It smelled like plants, Tyrell noticed. Some kind of leaf steeped in hot water. "You have not learned," she added. "Which is disappointing but not surprising." Tyrell found his voice. It came out as a croak. "What? What are you?" The woman tilted her head. "That is a complicated question. The simple answer is that we are human. We have always been human. We will always be human." She paused. "But human can mean many things. You see our cities and our broadcasts and our cooking shows, and you think that is all we are. That is the part of us we kept. The part we refused to let go, because we wanted to remember what being human felt like." "The part you kept?" Tyrell repeated. "We became something else a long time ago. Your scouts measured our technology and saw chemical rockets and radio waves. They saw what we chose to show them. What we show everyone." The woman gestured with one hand. The viewport changed. It still showed Earth. The blue marble still floated in the darkness, beautiful and fragile looking. But now Tyrell could see through it, not through the rock and water and air, but through reality itself. He saw what lay beneath the surface of the world. A structure of impossible complexity filled his vision. It existed in directions his brain could not process. It stretched through dimensions he had no words for. Patterns of light and energy wove through geometries that made his eyes water and his thoughts scatter. It was vast beyond measurement. It was ancient beyond time. And it was alive. "We spread through 11 dimensions," the woman explained calmly. "We exist in spaces your physics says cannot exist. We can step between moments. We can fold distance like cloth. We can reach into the machinery of reality and adjust it according to our needs." Tyrell felt tears running down his scaled face. He did not know why he was crying. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why show this to us? Why not simply destroy our fleet?" "Because we do not destroy." The woman's voice softened. "We spent 10,000 years learning every way a species can hurt itself and others. We mastered weapons that could unmake stars. We created plagues that could erase genetic lines from existence. We built machines of war so terrible that their memory alone drives lesser minds insane." She sipped her tea again. "And then we grew tired of it. Violence is boring. Cruelty is boring. The universe is vast and strange and full of wonders, and we decided we would rather spend eternity exploring it than punishing everyone who threatens us. But our people, the ones who vanished, they are alive. All of them. We moved them elsewhere while we decided what to do with you." The woman smiled slightly. "They are confused and frightened, but they are unharmed. We do not kill unless we must, and we almost never must." Tyrell struggled to understand. "You could destroy us. You could wipe out the entire dominion with a thought. But you choose not to? Would you stomp on an anthill that had done you no real harm? Would you burn a forest because a bird had startled you?" The woman shook her head. "You came here expecting to conquer. You expected us to be afraid. But fear requires respect for the threat. And Commander, your fleet is not a threat. It is a curiosity. An opportunity to see whether your species might eventually become something better." She set down her cup. It floated in mid-air, defying gravity through means Tyrell could not begin to guess. "There is one more thing you should know," she said. "Check your fleet roster. Check the crew manifests of your remaining ships." Tyrell's hands trembled as he pulled up the data on his console. The numbers looked wrong. He checked again. They were still wrong. 40% of his fleet was now crewed entirely by aliens. Not Vorethi. Others. Familiar species. Faces he recognized from conquest records. The Yalori. The Keth. The Mira. The Thanoth. All 11 species the Dominion had conquered and subjugated over centuries of expansion. They were here. They were on his ships. They had been here for hours, waiting in silence, wearing their chains of slavery like costumes. They were no longer slaves. We have been collecting them, the woman explained. Every species your Dominion has taken. Every civilization you have crushed. We have been watching, and we have been helping. Quietly, patiently, one by one. We have restored what you tried to destroy. Thyral looked at his view screen. On ships throughout the fleet, he saw Varathi crew members surrounded by the species they had once ruled. The former slaves were not attacking. They were not seeking revenge. They were simply standing there, waiting, watching, showing the Varathi what it felt like to be powerless. Your Dominion is over, the woman said. It ended the moment you entered this system. The choice you face now is simple. Go home and tell your people what you learned here, or stay and become another lesson we teach to the next visitors. She picked up her tea again. We genuinely hope you choose wisely. We are curious about your future. The woman smiled one last time. Then she was gone. The teacup was gone. The impossible view through reality was gone. Only the normal viewport remained, showing the distant blue planet and the stars beyond. Commander Thyral sat in his chair and stared at nothing. Around him, his crew waited in terrified silence. On ships throughout the fleet, the liberated species watched with patient, knowing eyes. The cooking shows continued on Earth below. Somewhere, a child laughed at a cartoon. Somewhere else, an old man finished his evening tea and went to bed. The humans had given their reply. And now the Varathi had to decide what it meant. The Varathi fled. It was not an organized retreat. There was no formation, no strategy, no dignity. Ships simply turned and ran. Engines screamed as captains pushed them beyond safe limits. Navigation officers plotted escape courses without caring about fuel or efficiency. Some vessels crashed into each other in their desperation to be first through the void. The liberated species did not stop them. They stepped aside, moved to shuttles, and departed for ships of their own that appeared from nowhere. They had no need for Varathi vessels. They had something better now, something given to them by beings who existed in 11 dimensions. Commander Thyral watched his fleet scatter across the solar system. The mighty armada that had conquered 11 worlds now fled like frightened animals. 300 warships, reduced to a panicked mob. He did not join them. Not yet. The human woman had returned. She stood beside him on the bridge, watching the chaos through the viewport. Her teacup had been refilled. She seemed perfectly relaxed. You are not leaving, she observed. I am trying to understand, Thyral said. His voice was hollow, empty. The conqueror had nothing left to conquer, and he did not know who he was without that purpose. Understand what? Why you showed mercy. We came to enslave your world. We threatened extinction. We have spent centuries crushing species beneath our rule. By any measure, we deserve destruction. The woman sipped her tea. Deserve is an interesting word. Who decides what anyone deserves? Us? You? The universe itself? She shook her head. We stopped believing in deserving a long time ago. It is a trap, a way of thinking that leads only to pain. Then why spare us? Because destruction is easy. Mercy is harder. The woman turned to look at him directly. Her eyes held depths that Thyral could not measure. Because the universe is very large and very old, and we have learned that every species has potential, even the cruel ones, even the conquerors, even the ones who seem beyond hope. You think we can change? We think everyone can change. Whether you will is a different question. That part is up to you. Thyral felt something strange. It took him a moment to recognize it as shame. He had not felt shame since he was young. Conquerors learned to kill that emotion early. What happens now? He asked. To the Dominion? To the species we ruled? The Dominion is finished. Not because we ended it, but because it cannot survive what you will tell them. The truth spreads. The lie dies. The woman finished her tea and set the cup down. It vanished before touching any surface. The species you conquered will rebuild. They have already started. We have been helping them for years, in small ways. Teaching, healing, reminding them of who they were before you came. And we will be hated. Hunted. They will want revenge. Perhaps. Or perhaps they will surprise you. Perhaps they will choose a different path. The woman smiled sadly. That is the thing about freedom. It includes the freedom to forgive. Not everyone will use it, but some will, and that is enough. Thyrol looked out at the stars. His fleet was gone now, scattered to the void. Only the eternal mandate remained, hanging alone above the blue planet that had humbled an empire. I have one more question, he said. Ask, how long have you been like this? How long have the humans been? Whatever you have become. The woman was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Time is complicated for us. We do not experience it the way you do. But by your measurements, a very long time. Longer than your species has existed. Longer than most of the stars you see in your sky. Thyrol felt dizzy. That is impossible. Your civilization is young. Your recorded history barely spans a few thousand years. Our visible civilization is young. The part we chose to keep. The part that builds cities and writes stories and argues about politics and watches cooking shows. The woman's smile held ancient sadness. But we were here before all that. We were here before your oldest ancestors crawled from their oceans. We watched galaxies form and die. We explored possibilities that no longer exist. Then why do you stay? Why live as ordinary humans when you could be anything? Because ordinary is precious. The woman's voice softened. We became gods, in a sense. We gained powers beyond description. We could create worlds and end them. We could reshape reality according to our desires. And we discovered something important. What? None of it made us happy. None of it gave us meaning. The more power we gained, the more empty we felt. We had everything, and everything was not enough. She looked down at the planet below. So we chose to remember. We kept pieces of ourselves tied to ordinary life, to cooking shows and birthday parties and morning coffee and evening walks, to small joys and small sorrows and the beautiful ordinary miracle of being alive. She turned back to Thyrol. That is why we did not destroy you. Not because we could not because you did not threaten us, but because destruction would have cost us something, a piece of our humanity, a fragment of who we chose to be. And we have lost enough fragments over the ages. We did not want to lose another. Thyrol understood. Or he thought he did. Perhaps understanding would take longer than he had. Go home, the woman said gently. Tell your people what you learned. Not just about our power. Tell them about the choice we made. The choice to be more than conquerors. The choice to be better than our worst instincts. Will they listen? Some will. Some will not. That is how change works. Slowly. One mind at a time. One generation at a time. She stepped back. Perhaps in 1,000 years, your descendants will look at the stars and feel wonder instead of hunger. Perhaps they will reach out with friendship instead of weapons. Perhaps they will become the kind of species we would be honored to know. And if they do not, then we will still be here. Watching, waiting, hoping. The woman began to fade. The universe has time. So do we. She was gone. Commander Thyrol sat alone on the bridge of his empty ship. Below him, Earth turned slowly in the void. The sun painted its clouds with gold and pink. The ocean sparkled like jewels. It was beautiful. It had always been beautiful. He had been too focused on conquest to notice. He gave the order to leave. The eternal mandate turned away from the blue planet and began the long journey home. Behind him, the solar system grew smaller. Earth became a point of light among millions. Then it disappeared entirely. But Thyrol knew he would never stop seeing it. That blue marble would haunt him forever. Not with fear, though fear was there. With something else. Something he did not have a word for yet. Perhaps it was the beginning of change. Across the galaxy, news spread. The Vorathi Dominion had attacked humanity and lost. Not in battle, not through war, through something stranger. Something that spoke of power beyond comprehension and mercy beyond reason. The conquered species rose up. The chains fell away. Old governments reformed. Old cultures remembered themselves. Healing began. Slow and painful and necessary. And on Earth, life continued. A woman finished her morning tea and started cooking breakfast. A child caught a bus to school. An old man read a newspaper on his porch. A couple argued about dishes. A baby took her first steps while her parents cheered. In coffee shops and public squares, in cities and villages and lonely farmhouses, humans lived their small, precious, ordinary lives. They laughed and cried and loved and failed and tried again. They watched cooking shows and attended birthday parties and argued about sports. They were ordinary. They chose to be ordinary. And in that choice, they found something that all their power could not give them. They found home, far beyond the edge of normal space, in dimensions that had no names. Something vast and ancient continued its watch. It looked at the galaxy and saw potential. It saw young species taking their first steps toward the stars. It saw old species learning new ways. It saw the slow, difficult, beautiful process of growth, and it waited. Not for conquest, not for worship, not for fear. It waited for friends. It waited for company. It waited for the day when the silence between stars would be filled with voices worth hearing. Somewhere, a young species sent its first message into the void. A simple signal, full of hope and fear and desperate wonder. They asked if anyone was listening. They asked if they were alone. In a frequency they could not yet perceive, humanity smiled. The welcome was already being prepared.